Welcome back. On today's episode, Michelle and I are excited to speak with founder, author, and speaker Orly Ziwi about branding for startups. So let's hop in. How are you, Orly?
Good morning. How are you? Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Doing wonderful. Hey, Michelle.
Hey Matt, hey Orly, welcome to the show. Very excited to have you here.
Thank you.
And Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New
Yes.
Year, 2024, right?
Yes, I know. I think you might have been the last, no, probably I met a few other people after you, but one of the last new people I met in 2023. Um, and one of the things that stood up to me when we met was how passionate you are about naming things. Whether it is naming people, like your own identity, or naming a company. And I was like, we need to talk with Orly about naming a product because that's always
Absolutely.
something
It's a
that
big deal, right?
it's a big deal for product people and for
It
companies
is.
in general, right?
Yep.
But before that, let's introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and how did you get to where you are?
Oh, that's a story.
Let's go for it.
That's a
Yes, we
story.
love stories.
Yes.
So, so I always say, I basically what I say is I'm multicultural, multilingual, because that kind of wraps up everything. But I was born in Israel, but I grew up in Paris and in Lausanne, Switzerland before my family immigrated to the States. So English is actually my third language. And I think that all of that moving and getting used to different cultures and different languages was really like the perfect training ground for doing the work that I do.
Mm,
Because what I do is I help companies clarify and communicate their zone of genius so they can attract more of their ideal clients. And
Mm.
that clarification process really came from an understanding of, really reading between the lines and being able to understand what people are saying, even when they're not speaking, or when they're
mm.
speaking a language you don't understand. People are people no matter where you are. And I found it really fascinating looking back, thinking about how well I learned how to read people because I had to. I didn't have a choice. I didn't know the language. When we came to the States, I didn't speak a word of English.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, I learned it
Wow.
in actually learned it in 3 months.
Oh,
Hmm.
impressive.
Well, I was 11,
You,
so
okay. You had, yeah. Plus, you kind of have to, right? You kind of,
I kind of do. Yeah, I mean, unless you go to an international school,
yeah,
but my parents are very old school, throw you in the deep end and you
that's
figure out
right.
them,
You got to figure it out.
Yeah. And it's always amazing to see how kids learn languages so fast. But
Yeah.
something you said over there about another skill that you learn while you were doing this is reading people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you had to sharpen that even without knowing that you were doing this, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I would say, one of so age 7 is when the receptors close. So when you're born, and I've actually done quite a bit of study about this because when I had kids, I wanted them to also speak French, which they know a few words, but sadly they're not bilingual.
You should move
But
to Montreal.
yeah, well, that's exactly. But what I learned is that up till the age of 7, all of those receptors are open. And what's
Mm,
fascinating to me is the way babies learn language. Babies are open to all languages, right? But what
right.
happens is they start to respond to the positive cues they get from their parents when they get the word right. And little by little, it's like they get channeled into the language of
Hmm.
their family.
Hmm.
And if you don't have access or if you don't are not exposed to different languages um, up to the age of 7, it's much harder after that. So I grew up listening to 6 to 7 languages on a daily basis because both my parents are multilingual. And so based on what language they spoke, I knew who they were talking to on the phone.
Right.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's an argument for teaching children languages earlier in life. I know I
That's
didn't start to hear another language till high school.
Yeah, it's too
And so,
late. It's too late
yeah, it's
then.
too late by then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why people say where I learned Spanish in high school, which actually I did.
Yeah,
I,
me too.
I don't remember anything, but the reason I do is because I had been hearing it all along, not
Right.
Spanish, but different
Other
languages.
languages. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
But
Is
yeah.
this being receptive to other people to understand them without um understanding what they're saying, is that something that you can teach others?
Hmm. Well, that's such an interesting question. I've never been asked that before.
Always first time.
There
Yeah.
you go. I think so, but here's the thing. In order to do that, you have to stop talking.
Mm,
And
True.
most, right? And most people, as you know, when there's a conversation, they're just waiting for the moment where they can jump in,
that's right.
which is why, when I was trained in design thinking. I went back to school, I got an MBA, and I learned that whole process of design thinking. And the first step is empathic listening. And that's because if you can't relate to the person, you can't solve their problem. And I think the same is true when you're learning about somebody. If you just stop talking and just ask open-ended questions, this is the key, right? Ask open-ended questions. Because if you ask yes, no questions, you don't really learn that much.
Mhm.
But you also have to then stop and really listen. And then, instead of jumping in with your opinion, ask clarifying questions. That's also part of the design thinking process. Ask
Right.
clarifying questions. And then there's the yes and, response. Always kind of keep it going and not have it be, not that it's adversarial, but
Mhm,
really focus more on I'm curious and I want to learn.
mhm, mhm. Yeah.
So this is where the importance of active listening. Moshe and I had a conversation recently about this. So definitely parallels with that conversation and product managers. When we're trying to listen to customers, we need to actively listen to what they're saying to identify the problems and maybe even what they're not saying. So like the non-verbal cues that we might get from customers.
Right. And also they have to be in the right environment where they feel safe to tell you their opinion.
Mhm,
Hmm.
So, one of the things that I do a lot of retreats and workshops. And when I get people in a room, one of the things I always do is I make sure I get information. There's a whole process, but before the workshop, and the responses are always, they're never attached to a name, so people don't have to worry. But it's really hard to do this in a room where your boss is. And so
Hmm.
it really comes down to, are you looking to learn, or are you looking to have people validate what you believe? And I think
That's right.
there's a lot of that going on, which is part of why, we don't approach it from a curiosity perspective, but more from a perspective of, I'm right, and I want and I want people to validate that what I'm saying is right.
mhm.
Confirmation.
Confirmation bias. There you
That's
go.
right. Yep.
Right, right,
Yep.
right. Absolutely. So going back into, so you got to what you're doing today, and let's dive a bit more into that before we get into naming.
Yeah.
But think about how do we get into naming, because that's really what I'm interested in today. But in general, you work with a startup. How do you help them?
So first of all, I do want to say one other thing about this. It took me a while to realize why I am so passionate about startups. So I come from a long line of entrepreneurs on my father's side. And
Mm-hmm.
I grew up, my father was an inventor and entrepreneur, and struggled a lot in trying to really establish himself. And that stuck with me. And I think, for me, working with startups, when I help them, I feel like I'm also helping the family. And so it's also personal, for me.
Hmm.
In terms of how I help them, one of the things I've learned, and I always say this to my clients too, find your lane and stay in your lane. So my lane is I make fuzzy clear. That's really it. That's what I do. And that's important because if I don't understand who I am as a brand, I can't really market it, because you can't sell something that you yourself don't understand. So clarity is absolutely critical. And then you need to be able to communicate in such a way that people get it, they want it, they value it, they're willing to pay a premium for it. And the problem is that so often, people just want to throw information out there and hope that somehow something sticks, but we're being messaged at a rate of roughly 12,000 messages a day, which is actually more than 4 million a year. And that's on the low end. Just to give you perspective, in 1985, that number was 1,500 a day. So, you know, it's like over 1,000% increase because of the internet, because of social media, because all those. And so what people don't realize is that I don't have time to figure out who you are. So you're asking me to buy something. I don't even know who you are, what you do, why it matters to me. And what people tend to do is they tend to speak from their perspective. But when you're selling something or when you're trying to engage somebody, you're not engaging yourself. You're engaging people who don't know what this is. They haven't really understood the value of it. And so focusing on the why, as in why it matters to that ideal client, is another huge part of this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's so much there that resonates with me.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to hear that because I've spent my entire career in that space. So I'm happy to hear it.
I'm sure,
Well,
I'm sure you're hearing it quite a lot.
I go back to all the noise, like you're like to your point of the noise, like you have to get to the point as quickly as possible. You know, people's attention spans are dropping, you know, astronomically. And if you don't catch them right away.
Yeah, actually, I have the stat on that. So in 2000, the average American, you know, I'm just using Americans, so sorry for the bias there, but the average American adult's attention span in 2000 was 12 seconds. Now it's hovering somewhere around 8 seconds. And I read somewhere, I don't know if this is true, but the average goldfish attention span is 9 seconds.
Oh gosh. Oh, no.
It feels true. I don't know if it is true.
It does
but
feel
it
a bit
really
true.
Feels true.
Oh,
But
no.
of course, when I land on your homepage, you got 6 seconds before I make a go, no go decision.
Mm-hmm.
Not very
Right.
much time. So when you put all this stuff on your homepage, that's internally focused, all about you, how great you are, your expertise, and then you're immediately selling me, sign up, you know, buy this, you know, book this. It's like, I don't even know why I'm here. I don't even know what this is, right? So there's also this kind of educational component of how people access information. And it's not by telling me everything up front, it's helping me discover.
Right. Right. So do you have a method that you use when you help your clients, or is that your secret sauce? Or I'm sure your secret sauce is you, because everyone is doing it different, and it's also about the relationship and people can actually work with you. But you know, can you share with us a bit about that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the first step, like, you know, basically I break it down into two parts. The first part is the brand strategy. Who am I? What's my core value? You know, coming up with the first round of an elevator pitch, but it's really getting, you know, there's a very clear path to that. And so that whole process is exercises I do both, you know, I'll send it to them ahead of time. And then we do it on virtually. We'll then get to the clear piece, which is if I don't understand your core value, and by that I mean, what is the thing that is in the DNA of your brand? And everybody knows what it is instinctually, but they think, oh, we're going to have all these other values, right? But those are just how you do business. And then the second part is, who are they, right? So I understand who I am now. I understand who they are, meaning my ideal clients, not just everybody on the planet who could use what I do, but the people for whom this would be a lifesaver. This would be something that would help them sleep better at night. So I have a whole process around that. There's another exercise. And then from that, I develop key messages. And then from the key messages, we break that down into the messages that are going to that are really going to inform your website. So, you know, I look at a website as, you know, I step into, you know, through the front door, which is your homepage, right? Your homepage is your front door. I want to know, why am I here and why should I care? That's it. The other stuff, I can go dig in and look for more stuff. What people tend to do, again, is they think, oh, I'm just going to put everything on here because I don't want to forget anything, or I want people to know everything. And that's just not how we access information, right?
Yeah.
And so then once I have that, then, you know, I put together what I call kind of a cheat sheet, which is how you go about having a conversation when you meet someone who looks like they might be your ideal client. And by the way, I also help you develop an elevator pitch, which in fact will help you identify that ideal client. Because if it doesn't resonate, when I say, for instance, when I say I make fuzzy clear, if that doesn't resonate with you, then there's nothing more to say, because my ideal client will hear that and go, oh my God, how do you do that? I've been struggling for years to do that.
Right.
Tell me more, right? That's what you want people to say, tell me more. So what I also build is kind of a ladder, you know, of how do I get to the conversation where we can begin to have a talk about how I can help you. But before we get to that, I need to understand, is this the right person? Do they align with the thing that I've established, I've identified is really my why?
So that's
Oh,
focusing also on the understanding of who our clients are and making sure that we don't waste our time on someone that is
Exactly.
not even going to be the right client.
Yeah, why chase after somebody who's never going to be a client? You know, but people tend to come at it from the other perspective, which is, well, I'll just throw all this stuff out there and somehow I'll attract, you know, like
yeah.
throwing out a
Throw it
net
against it.
ocean.
This is
Yeah.
actually a very important message to product people and to companies in general, because a lot of the tension that sometimes is created is between product and sales,
Yeah.
where sales don't understand who the product is for, or they have ideas in their head that it can fit other type of clients without actually making sure that product will, you know, agree with that. And not just agree because they agree, but agree because that's the right thing to do with the product and the right focus for the company. And then they go after these clients, and sometimes they will be successful selling them, and then product have to fit the product to to that client, which is always a disaster.
Yeah, you know, that's such an interesting point, which is why, you know, so I'm sure you're familiar with Steve Blank and the Lean Startup. You know, he's the grandfather of this whole concept.
Mhm.
And, you know, one of the things is that, you know, you have to be able to really understand the problem you are solving. Otherwise, you're just a solution looking for a problem.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I was thinking the movie Wolf of Wall Street, where Leonardo DiCaprio's character asked the guy at the table to sell him a pen. And I was thinking he tries to sell the pen to Leonardo DiCaprio, but if Leonardo DiCaprio worked on a computer, he wouldn't care about the pen, but he could have talked to the server who takes the order and writes it down. That would be the pitch. You're like, why would it just talk to the person that actually needs it?
Mhm.
And you know instantly whether it's gonna stick or not
Right.
at
And then
that point very quickly.
you're actually bringing up another really good point, which is users and buyers. So a lot of times, you know, you're selling something, it's not to the user, but it's the people who are going to pay for this.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so you have to be thinking about how is a user going to access this and how is it going to help them. But this process of really understanding what matters to your ideal customer is really critical, because it gets to what's in their space, what's in their world, and also, you know, what is the pain, what is the thing that is really at the heart. And it's rarely what you think it is, right? Because once we do this exercise, we discover that it's something altogether different. Than it's not just I need a pen. I need to be somebody that people respect, or people look at and say, this is a go-to person in the company. Or, there's also usually there's a personal brand in there that's wrapped up in the decision. But then there's also the other piece is, what do I get? What do I gain? Well, how does what you do help me? Because if you're not helping me, then why would I buy from you, right? I need to know that you understand my problem, you've got my back, you've got a solution, and that working with you is going to help what is motivating me as well.
Right. And so
Excuse me.
you mentioned personal brand. So if you're an early stage startup or a founder of one or something like that, like tying your personal brand and your startup brand those need to be in sync as well.
Well, they're the same thing in the beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
And, I'm always fascinated by this idea of, building a culture. The culture starts with the founder. So if you can figure out, what your secret sauce is, what your zone of genius is, and what, kind of how to communicate, this core value, then you build a culture based on that value. And it's easier then to find the people who are aligned with that. During the research for my book, one of the things that I discovered is that, the number 3 reason that startups fail is they have the wrong team.
Mhm.
The number 1 reason is no market need. And not surprisingly, number 2 reason is they run out of cash.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
The team itself, making sure you have the people there that understand the why of what you're trying to solve for, the customers that you're trying to solve that for,
Right.
and the ultimate mission and vision of the company.
Because they're going to be your brand ambassadors. So if they
Yes.
don't get it, if they're not like, they need to be, in the beginning, it's really about this alignment is so important, because if they don't get it, if they feel like it's not a fit, first of all, they're not going to stay. Second of all, they're not going to be able to speak to your brand externally. And as we know, people speak both a positive and negative. So you want people really aligned who are
Absolutely.
going to say the right message out there.
Absolutely. So in a previous episode, we talked with Tuvit. You know Tuvit, I believe, from Founder Institute in Philadelphia, right?
Yeah.
And with her, we spoke about how to craft the story of the product. And because of your, and we touched about that also in this discussion about the story and how do you tell your story, right? But with you, I wanted to dive a bit into the naming of the product, because that's something you're quite passionate about. And I can see that from everything that you were talking about, you're really looking into that essence, and that essence, it's almost like a perfume, like you're finding like this 2-3 words, one or maybe up to 3. I don't know if 3 is too much for a name of a product already, but you find this name that will really, just by saying the name, people will already kind of get it. That's how I see it, but maybe I'm wrong about that, right? So tell us first of all, how do you see a name of, and think about the product. I know that it also resonates. Sometimes many companies will have the same name as a product as the company. Sometimes you will have a company name with many product names. But let's just think about the product first.
Okay, so first of all, we've already talked about this, the importance of getting clear. So remember that the name is the identity of your brand. Your logo is shorthand for your brand. So the first step, people come up with a logo before they've even figured out the name. One of the things I always tell my clients, startup clients, is forget about the logo for right now. Let's focus on the name, because you can't have a logo that represents the wrong name. And if you have the wrong name, you can't really build from there anyhow. So, so what you need to do is, once you really understand what's, think of it like a package, right? You know what's inside the box. The logo is the bowl, but the name is the shape of the box, right? And I look at this and I get it. I get something really core about what this is. And I've already, there's this idea, this is, one of the things I did in my book is I unpacked all these marketing myths. And one of them is, oh, people buy in spite of our name, like almost like the name doesn't matter. And that is not true, which is why I use Nike as an example. I don't know if you know what Nike's original name was.
I vaguely remember, but yeah, go ahead and explain it. Yeah.
Well, the reason I use them as an example, they had that name for 10 years and they were never able to grow to where they are today, right? So I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was, first of all, completely forgettable. Remember that the company was started by 3 athletes, right? And so the name was Blue Ribbon Sports. Think about that. Makes sense if you're thinking in terms of a prize, right? But blue ribbons are typically in county fairs. They're
Right.
not Olympians, don't get blue
Charlotte's Web.
ribbons. What's that?
Charlotte's Web. I was thinking
Yeah,
Charlotte's.
right. Yeah, the
The blue
pig, the
road,
biggest pig. Yeah,
the pig.
exactly.
Yep.
And so they had that name for 10 years and they never grew to, I think they were at like maybe $10 million at that point.
Mm.
Which sounds like a lot, but I mean, they're like in the billions
Where they
now.
are now, yeah.
So they hired this guy, Scott Bedbury, who basically, went on this, he called it the big dig, to really figure out what was this thing, right? What was it? And ultimately, because we're talking about products, I don't know if you know this, but Nike was the name of their breakout waffle shoe. And it's the perfect name because Nike is the goddess of victory. So ancient Greeks, they prayed to the goddess victory before they went into battle. I mean, what better name for a
Yeah.
company that, clothes and puts shoes on Olympic athletes?
Right.
Mhm.
And as soon as within like a year, I mean, it's like the name really helped explode the company because it now said something that people could grab onto. Plus, you're right, Moshe, that, Blue Ribbon Sport, like it does not roll off the tongue. So I actually have, when we get to this, I've got like here all the components of what makes a great name. And
Cool.
long and forgettable is definitely not, those are not qualities. But
Yeah.
what's amazing is that how quickly people forgot all about it because they never remembered it in the first place.
Mhm,
Mhm.
mhm. It's interesting because Nike is actually an interesting example coming from Israel. In Israel, we don't call it Nike, we call it Nike. And I'm not sure why.
Yeah,
Uh,
why is that?
I have no idea. But there is that thing about different countries, and we talked about it in the beginning, how you move from different countries, where in different countries the names will be pronounced differently. IKEA in Israel, and I think also in Sweden, is pronounced differently. It's not pronounced IKEA, it's pronounced IKEA. So there is like this also a cultural thing in the area where the name is coming to, as well as you need to be careful about names or words that have negative connotation or
Mhm.
swear words in different places, right?
Yes. Oh, I
So,
have a great example for you. So do you remember the Nova? That
mhm.
car?
The car, yeah,
Well,
the car.
but in Spanish, it means doesn't go. Nova. So they had to change the name. I mean, this is such a great point because we tend to be so English focused and we
Mhm.
forget that there are, billions of people who do not speak English, right?
But
Yeah.
this is where the logo comes in because you can look at a Nike logo, the swoosh, and not even need the word Nike anymore.
Well,
But it
So
took
now,
them a while to get to that.
yeah,
That's a
now,
branding. Yeah.
yeah.
yes, that took millions and millions of dollars to do that.
Hmm.
But yes,
Mhm.
eventually, well, that's like why I said that the logo is shorthand for your brand. If you have the right name and you have a logo that can represent it in a graphic way so that all I have to do is see it and instantly, I
Technique.
connect with the whole experience, right? And by the
Yeah.
way, the swoosh is actually a section of the wing of the goddess of victory. That's what it was supposed to be.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay, this is
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've read a lot about Nike because, for my book, I did a lot of research.
Yeah.
Also, don't know if you know, but they paid, I think, Steve Knight, I think that's the guy's name. One
it
of the
is. Yeah, Phil Knight.
yeah,
Phil Knight.
he,
Yep.
he was teaching at a art school in Oregon, and one of the students, he had one of his students do this. She got paid $15 and 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 shares in Nike.
Oh, nice.
Which now, millions, worth millions. So
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes it's worth it to do this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
before we get into like some steps or rules for naming your product, another question I have is about especially in tech, in digital products, many companies are trying to come up with some nonsense words that will become a name. I don't know if Yahoo was something like that. Google has a meaning, but most people don't know what the meaning is. They
Right.
know Google more than they know what the meaning of the word Google. But there is a lot of those names that are just don't mean anything, and they do become or not a brand name, and then everyone know what Yahoo is or whatever, right? So what's your thought about that?
Well, first of all, let me say this. The important thing about names are, so there's, I don't know if you know Marty Neumeier, he's the author of The Brand Gap, and
Mm.
Zag. He's like a brand guru, and I quoted him quite a bit in my book.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
one of the things that, so he has seven criteria. The first one is distinctive. So does it stand out in other names, you know, in your industry, in your space?
mhm,
So that's important. It also has to be short because it's got to be easy to remember, and it
mhm,
has to fit the business. So, you know, and I'm trying to think of like, okay, so Facebook I think is a good example. And, you know, it used to be called the Facebook. And
Mhm.
then they dropped the, if you watched, you
Justin
know,
Timberlake dropped it right.
yeah, and yeah, exactly. And so it has to be short, and it's got to fit. And it fit, you know, Facebook fit because it fit what the purpose of the product was. It also has to be easy to spell and pronounce. And a lot of these names, the reason that they fail is because it's not fun to say it. That's the other thing. Marty Neumeier says, you know, it's got to have good mouthfeel. Like when you say it, you smile, or it just feels good to say it. Like Nike, you know, even Nike. I mean, you know, it's nice to say. It doesn't feel, you know, and then it's gotta also have legs. Like, can you extend on it? Like, can you build a whole brand around it? And then the last one is you gotta be able to trademark it. So those are the seven main components. The idea of
mhm.
a nonsensical word, it can work, but the problem, do you have an example, Moshe? Because I can, you know, is there one in particular that stands
Yeah, I don't
out?
know if Yahoo is a nonsensical or not. I guess it's not. I mean, what?
It has a meaning. I
Yeah,
mean,
it does have a meaning, I guess. Um, I've seen so many of those now. I don't have anything. And Miro
Is
is
Etsy, is
Miro.
Etsy, is Etsy? I don't
oh,
know if
Etsy.
Etsy,
Yeah,
Yeah,
Etsy.
it's a good
But
I don't
one.
that's
know.
fun to, it's fun to
It is
say.
fun. Yeah, it is kind of fun to
Fun to
say.
say, and
Yep.
also it's like whether it ends on a consonant or a vowel, and kind of how it's built. I mean, you know, you can break down a word in terms of like kind of how it all falls together when you say it.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy and fun to say. Yes.
Hmm.
And I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, does Etsy have a meaning? I haven't looked that up,
I,
but
I don't know if it does or not.
yeah.
I've
But
never
it's,
heard of it
yeah,
anywhere else.
right.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm. I see.
but you know, like let's say, so Airbnb is another one, right? So
Hmm.
it actually we used to, the Airbnb is actually short for what was originally, I think it was air breakfast, bed and breakfast, like,
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I think
right?
so. Yep.
And then they shortened to the Airbnb. But you know, that's also fun to say. And it
Mm-hmm.
ends,
Hmm.
you know, ending on consonants usually is nice, like Facebook, Airbnb, there's the right. But then you have Apple. So the thing with Apple, the reason I think it has really grown and been sustainable since, you know, 1982, is that 1984 was the first Macintosh. I don't know if you know the story behind this, but it just so happens that apples were Steve Jobs' favorite fruit. That was really the reason he called it Apple. And
Hmm.
he named his first computer the Macintosh because Macintosh is the most popular apple in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Ah, this is. I'm learning all kinds of new. I'm learning all kinds of new
I
things.
know. I'm like,
Yeah.
am I bursting your bubbles here about all
No,
these?
no, it's blowing my mind because I'm thinking, even Apple, like if you think of something that everyone knows what an apple is,
Yeah.
that's something
Right.
else that could really resonate with your branding. Like, oh, I just know, and fortunately, I mean, their logo is an apple, but even the bite that's taken out of the apple,
Yeah, they talk a lot about that it's Newton taking, you know, the apple falling, you know, all of that. And I think the original logo actually did have the tree, the apple with Newton underneath, and, you know, the apple falling on his head, you know, the whole,
yeah,
how he came up with the idea of
But
gravity.
but that's how you can build around it. That goes
Yes,
that
it
yeah,
has a
rule about
story. It has
yeah.
a, that's the last thing I want to mention is having a story, not just you picked something out of the air, but it has a story that's meaningful to you. So, you know, Steve Jobs, you know, I mean, say what you will about the man, but he really was a genius. And certainly in terms of marketing, he was a marketing genius. But he, you know, what he wanted, well, he and of course the other Steve, I know people forget that there were two founders, both named Steve, but
Mhm.
what's interesting about Apple is that it was very deliberate because, you know, you had, I mean, Microsoft, what does that mean? You know, I mean, do people like to say Microsoft? I mean, it doesn't have that.
Yeah.
And, you know, it still feels like it's never going to be cool.
But they
Yeah, it feels
just
antiquated. It feels antiquated.
they
almost.
just went over Apple as
Yeah.
the biggest company, so.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not saying that, right? I'm just,
It feels analog.
You're
though.
right. You're right. I just watched the movie BlackBerry about
oh, the BlackBerry. Oh my God, that's such an amazing story. I mean, to go
that is
from
an amazing story,
a
exactly.
leader to literally a dinosaur in such a short period of time. Yeah,
Well, that's the flip side, but the movie was about how they started, and their company name was RIM, Research in Motion, and Research in Motion is, a very like, blah name. RIM is a bit better, but it's just the acronym, and that happens a lot with companies that are just they have long names and then they just abbreviate it and it becomes the name, right?
Mhm.
yeah, IBM is a perfect example. International.
Right, right, exactly. But here we are also talking about a very different generation, like more than 100 years ago and stuff like that. But they never thought about like cool names over there. Back then it was just, whatever. And then they came up with the phone, the BlackBerry, and the first designer for it, because of the keyboard and how it looks like those, what you call it on the BlackBerry, I forget the word in English for the little sections in the BlackBerry. So that's why they decided to name it BlackBerry. These days, RIM doesn't exist anymore, but the company name is BlackBerry. So it's the same thing that's happened to Nike, not from valuation and from business perspective, but from naming perspective.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, you know, here's the thing about names. There's another really good example, which I'm hoping I can remember it. I guess it just sort of like out my head.
Mhm.
But there during M&A activity, the best name is the one that wins. And
Mhm.
so and I'm trying to think, it's going to come to me, but it's a financial company, and when they were bought, they tried to change the name, and they got so much mail or emails, right?
Yeah.
People were so incensed that they had to keep the original name. So,
Mm.
and if I ever think of it, I'll let you know.
For sure, for sure. So in going back to and it's very cool that we're doing this one after the other, these two episodes, but going back to Vit's episode, we did an exercise during the episode where we picked up a product, and then her method of creating the story is by picking an object that the product or the person or the company represents, and then trying to find the essence of that specific item, and from that creating the story. So we picked ChatGPT, and the object that we picked up for that was a glider, not a glider, a parachute that help you learn how to dive, like a tandem parachute. Mine, because Matt and I are a bit different about AI, mine was with a person, so it's tandem with a person in it. Matt was without a person, so it's just a machine that helps you. But it basically helps you dive, right? So if you would have to take that, and from that, you can build a story about what ChatGPT is all about.
Right,
But
right.
let's say we want to, I don't know if ChatGPT is a good name or not. First of all, what's your opinion about that?
Yeah.
Well, it's memorable.
Mm-hmm.
People have no trouble remembering it, so it definitely checks off that box.
But did you know what GPT is before
I don't.
ChatGPT came to the world? Do you know today what GPT means?
No,
Why these 3 letters?
no, I don't. What's the answer? Tell me.
Well, I know what it is, but I don't remember it. It's an acronym for a model to.
Generative, yeah, transformers, based the
Yeah,
T's for transformers, yeah.
I figured it was an acronym,
Yeah.
but
But
again,
the funny thing, when I was on my trip during the holidays I was traveling from New Orleans to Tampa, and on the way we stopped at Pensacola Airport, in another airport because I had to go to find a new car for my rental, whatever, long story. And then I saw they have a sign saying Fly GPT. And I was like, what's going on here? And yeah, and I was like, immediately I had this connotation to ChatGPT. But then I realized the code name for that airport was GPT. And they were trying to have people flying through that airport.
Wow. Yeah. Well,
But
so what you're speaking to is the culture. And what happens is often that names kind of live out their usefulness. And once the world around them changes, the name no longer makes sense, or they have to adapt in some way.
yeah,
You know, Kodak is such a great example. So I don't know if you know this story. You know, you can tell, I mean, I've spent a lot of time thinking about names, and it's such a great story. So Kodak, this is, you know, I think this is true, but was actually the sound that the first shutter of the first camera made. When you closed it, it sounded like Kodak.
really.
That's the Kodak myth. Again, I'm not, you know, I can't validate this. I can't, you
You
know,
weren't
Yeah.
there to witness it, yeah,
I
right?
was not there. It was, you know, 1860s or something. You know, I don't think any of us were anywhere.
No,
But
no,
it's funny because even if we go through this exercise now of saying, should we rename ChatGPT, it's
Yeah.
going to be a mute exercise because now everyone,
You,
the name already is there in such a big brand name that nothing can replace that. People will get upset if we replace it, even if it doesn't mean anything.
no, you can't replace it. Once it's in, so Google is also a great example because Google is, now we use it as a verb. It's in the American dictionary, in the English.
Right.
hmm
I mean, once you're in the dictionary, you're never leaving. Like, this is the name, right? And
Yeah.
so, and it also is interesting because of what it means, you know, infinite numbers, you know, and remember that Google replaced Ask Jeeves was that was
Yeah.
the alternative, right? A butler. I mean, who thinks of this stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, and again, it's also, there's another piece to naming, which is focus too much on today and not where we are going.
Mm.
So if you think about ChatGPT has now become kind of shorthand for AI. I mean, that's remarkable. How long has the
Mhm.
name been around?
Less than a year or a year.
Less than a year?
Yeah.
I mean, to get it, it's
Well,
already,
in the public eye, I'm sure it was there
Yeah.
before, but in the public
Yeah.
eye.
but yeah, in the public, I mean, to go from like zero recognition to being so ubiquitous that we, you know, I'm sure it's going to turn in some kind of, and it's going to turn into a verb or noun or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
it has that kind, you know, talk about having legs.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and now we talk about, we Google things, right? Like, but
That's right. Yeah.
I believe that one of the reasons why Google has really worked in a way that Ask Jeeves never could is, first of all, it's so snooty, right? Because Jeeves was supposed to be a butler. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
so right there, you've already, and in America, that will never fly.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
it's just never going to fly. So, so it's also, you kind of miss the mark in understanding your audience. And then you don't think in terms of the future. Like, you know, who could have imagined social media, you know, 50 years ago? It didn't exist. There was no internet, but there was a computer. Computers have been around since the 1940s. And so it's interesting that for me, names also have to be forward thinking.
hmm
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
I
Yeah.
like one of the criteria you mentioned about fun to say, like, I love AI, but I don't like saying ChatGPT. I don't think it's fun. I think I kind of struggle to say it sometimes. And so just in a sentence.
Yeah.
And so I think they could have thought longer term, but I don't think that they were really thinking about that. Like,
No, well, most people don't think at all about the name. That's the
yeah,
problem. And so
yeah,
what happens is sometimes they get lucky and it, you know, worms its way into the public consciousness and it sticks. And other times you have to change it. I mean,
yeah,
Blue Ribbon Sports being a perfect example of that. You know, it's like you throw something together based on your own experience. And the problem with naming is how often we forget that we're not naming the company for us, but for our future clients.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the goal of the name is to help somebody understand what this is,
Yeah.
what you get. And often it's, you know, I like to break it down. It's either the process or the outcome. And so, you know, with Nike, it's really about the outcome. Like, you know, we basically, we help winners win. I mean, that's really what they're saying.
Mhm.
And if you look at, you know, what's happened, you know, you have all these Olympic athletes, and the more of them who are wearing the Nike logo, the more that becomes, you know, it's like it's sort of gets ingrained in our mind that this is. So when you buy Nike now, when you buy a piece of clothing that has the logo, even though you will never stand on any kind of
You feel
podium
like a
ever
winner.
in your
Yeah.
life,
You feel like a
you
winner.
know, you
Yeah.
could feel like an athlete for, you know, the time you're wearing it, because he's
Yeah.
made that, you know, I mean, that's really, I think, when the name becomes ingrained in the consciousness of the
Yeah.
culture.
So if you were in the shoes of, or if you were in position to help ChatGPT
Yeah.
come up with a name before they became a huge thing, what would be like, tell us like, what would be your process to, quickly, what would be your process to sit down and come up with names and choose a name?
So here's what, so this is actually, I have done this, right? So this is what we do. You literally write a list of every word you can think of that sums up something about the experience of this app. I feel like they took the easy way out because it's chat speaking. I get that. But for me, the app is not about speaking. It's really about translating and doing it in like nanoseconds. It's like they take something that you're thinking, or, you know, I mean, that it is very brilliant. And I have used it just to kind of help me brainstorm. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, like, I would think of it in terms of a brainstorming tool. I
Mm-hmm.
would so once you make a list, right, and you literally, you just do a brain dump. Once you do that, then you organize them in columns. And so you'll have one that maybe is about translation, another one is about speaking, another one is about writing, or what, you know, what have you. And then you pick the best ones, the top three, and then you try them out. I would, you know,
Mhm.
I wonder if they had any kind of focus group for this, or if they even bothered. I'm assuming not. You know, it sounds like, right, they just kind of
Yeah.
threw something together and they got lucky and it stuck. But I
Right.
don't believe that it really explains what the heck this is. And
Mm-hmm.
And they were a closed company. This is before they went and got all the funding from Microsoft. So there's a whole backstory into like this was open AI in terms of it was not really meant to be
Yeah.
monetized
But the
right,
reason
necessarily.
the reason I'm asking this question is that most of us will not be Nike and most of us will not be ChatGPT.
right.
So we need to learn from that history and not do what they're doing, even though we think that we might have a product that will be like theirs, and be proactive about it and come up with that name that will help us get to where we want to get, right?
So one of the things I have found, and, you know, so I often go back, I often work with a company after they've had the name for a while.
Mm,
And one of the things I have realized is that too often there's just way too many words. And because what people tend to do who are not well versed in this is they try to explain the name versus getting a short, it's like, it's really like a translation. It's like, it's, you know, like the Facebook for college students, you know, that's what,
Mhm.
that's how people think of it, right? Like they feel like they have to explain it. But the reality is when you're building it for future use, you need to believe that that's what the other things are going to do. Marketing is going to help you do that. The logo is going to help you do that. And eventually, it's just the simplest way. It also is the easiest to remember.
mm, So when you're saying, I have the list, I put it in
Yeah,
columns based on
I'm actually
themes or whatever it is.
I'm
Now
pulling up the exercise right now, so I have it in front of me.
uh-huh.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and then I pick the top three. So picking those top three is a really could be a gut feeling or just what I think
No, no,
might
no,
be the right one.
no. So this is the part I left out. So,
Okay.
and what you're doing is you list as many words, 2 or 3 word sentences that are coming to mind when you pick a
Mm-hmm.
new startup.
Mm-hmm.
I often say to clients, you know, look at mythology, look at different languages, look at words that get translated into other languages,
Mm-hmm.
and then you organize them into buckets, right? And then you come up with 3 names based on words from the bucket with the most words.
Mm.
So you have a group think, and people,
Mhm.
you know, and you do it on Post-it notes. This is the design thinking process, right? You put names like one word, one sentence, and you throw them up on a board, and then you organize them into these buckets. And then we say, okay, we have one that's translation, one that's speaking, and one that's writing, let's say. But translation is the one that has the most words under it. And so that's the area. And
Mm.
then you narrow down into the words, and then you take them on a test run and you see which one resonates.
I see. I see.
And what I have found, and this is such a fascinating aspect of this process, that the words you use to build the name are the words that people use to describe the name. So
Yeah.
it's like a 360, right? And if you've done it right, people will literally give you back what you put in to come up with the name.
Mhm,
That's
mhm.
how you know it's a good name.
And I think that this also connects with what we talked with Tovit about telling the story of your product,
Mhm.
because the words can come from that story.
That's right. That's right. But you need to know the story.
Yeah, you need to know the story.
And more importantly, you need to understand how that story matters to your customer. Because
Mhm.
ultimately, yes, it's your story, but you know, as I said earlier, you're not speaking to yourself. So what you want is a story that resonates. When people hear it, they're like, yeah, there's something that's almost instinctual, guttural, what have you, where people will respond because it resonates with them.
Yeah. So what do you think about the name of our podcast?
You know, I hate being put on the spot that way. No matter what I
It's
say.
okay. It's okay. We are good with good critique. I mean,
Okay,
we already have it for almost 100 episodes. We're getting to our 100th episode in our 3rd anniversary. So it's doing okay, I guess. It's not like everyone is talking about us like they do about Apple or Nike, but
well, okay, so you know what, I think you're asking the wrong question.
okay, go for it.
Okay, so the question really is, what is it that you want people to know when they see the name? Like, what is the thing,
Right.
right? For me, product for product doesn't say anything about the conversational style, the fact that, you know, it's a really kind of comfortable conversation that, you know, leads to some interesting insights.
Mhm.
Right? It seems very utilitarian
Mm.
is the word I would use.
Mhm. Which
There's
it might
nothing
be.
wrong.
It,
What's
it might
that?
be, and that's how it started also.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with it being utilitarian, but
Mhm.
just in our conversation today, that name doesn't fit with what I am experiencing. And the logo, I'm assuming that's a microphone. Is that what that is?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
And to me, a microphone with the name product for product they don't go together.
Okay, no, that's fair. No, that's very good feedback, actually. No,
I,
that's excellent.
I gave the disclaimer from the very beginning.
That's
That's excellent.
and I give the response that we're open to feedback, so that's great.
Absolutely. Always open.
And if
Yeah,
you really, and if you want to explore this further, then we should talk.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I might have to explain to you what the podcast is all about, and that's what you said before. It's about you don't need to be there to explain what the product is or what the company is. People should be able to understand it, right?
That's right.
But that's interesting. I mean, you're not the obvious audience for us because the obvious audience are product people. And actually, in all the podcasting platforms, it's called product for product management for some reason.
Oh boy.
Yep. But it's to make it's more searchable. Yeah.
Yeah,
Product for
exactly.
product. Yeah. It's not. Yeah. The search engines don't like our name either.
Which is another interesting point.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing, right? It's got to be searchable. And is it trademarked? Have you trademarked it?
No.
Nope.
But who knows? Maybe we'll change the name. I mean, also with Tovit, we came up with an object, or we started thinking about what an object that can describe our podcast.
The object.
Yeah, the object. Yeah, exactly. I came up with one during the episode. I don't know, Matt, if you thought through that yet and have your object, but my object was a matchbox with lots of matches in it. For whatever reason, right? Sorry?
Yeah.
No, I'm just kind of, it's interesting because, you know, when you said Matchbox, I was thinking of cars because I raised two sons and they love
Mhm.
Matchbox cars, but
Mm,
Matchbox with matches. Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I did think about that. The matchboxes were
Yeah.
the matches are all the same though. And for what we do for product, we talk about different tools. So
Exactly. So it's really Matchbox with very colorful matches inside.
Right. Well,
and
again,
they all serve the same purpose of igniting a fire.
igniting
So,
fire. See, again,
Yeah.
but
doing
so
that exercise with the two of you would be really interesting because I think, you know, once you dig a little deeper, I think you're gonna land on, you know, again, you need the concept behind it before you can come up with the name.
Yeah. But I can tell you that seeing podcast names, I never seen any cool name for podcasts, really. Podcast names are usually very utilitarian,
Hmm?
in my
someone's
mind
name.
anyway. In my mind.
Yes. Yeah.
Somebody's name.
Yeah. One podcast I'm listening to recently for some reason, it's called Bible Time Machine. Uh,
Bible Time Machine? Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
which is
Explain.
about the Bible,
Figured that.
mostly about the Christian Bible, but there is some of the old Bible as well.
Yeah.
Just this is like history. It's all about history, and it's all unrelated to anything I'm doing. It's just an interest of mine. And the time machine there is because they were going back in time, I guess. So,
Right.
but it's funny because every time that you look, and I went through this exercise recently with my other podcast that is pretty, it's much newer, and we called it Beyond Product. But we came up with lots of names, and we did a bit of a bit similar process to the one you described, and we had lots of kind of like arguments about what's the right and some people wanted to add like a tagline and make it the name of the podcast, and it was very long and very hard to say. I couldn't say it as I was the host, you know, like every time I want to mention the podcast I have to say this long name, so I dropped it and I just left with a Beyond Product. And it actually was fitting because we also pivoted into what is it that we want to talk about, right? So
Right. No,
Beyond Product.
that makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, taglines should not be more than 7 words, and the best ones are like 3 to 5.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, products usually don't have taglines.
No, they don't.
Um,
Companies do, but yeah.
yes, yes. Okay. Well, we talked about a lot of things here, and
That's what I said.
we
It's fun.
definitely have a lot to think about. And this was really a great chat, Orly. And that process is, I hope to our listeners, it will give a bit of organization into when they need to pick up a name, how to do that. But I'm sure they can also reach out to you if they want your help. How can people reach out to you?
So ziwibrands.com, it's my website. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I also was going to say, when you go on my website, I have a free download of 10 personal brand tips. So it's right there on the homepage. So
So yeah, we can share that link also in the
yeah,
description of
and
the
yeah, I
episode.
have that, and I'll send that, you know, I'll give that to you.
Perfect.
And then I'm also, I am starting a series of workshops, and it's going to be 3 hours once a week. This one will be only on developing an elevator pitch. At the end of 3 hours, you will have a memorable, actionable elevator pitch that will resonate with your target audience. And it's
Perfect.
called What's Your Pitch?
What's your
And
pitch?
I have the link to that as well. And that starts at the end of January.
Excellent. And then give the
Excellent.
name of your book as well. I know we talked about that
So
quite
the name of
frequently.
my book, right, is Ready Launch Brand, the Lean Marketing Guide for Startups. You can find it really anywhere where
Excellent.
they're sold, but if you go
Awesome.
on Amazon, you can also see the, I think I have 15 5-star reviews, something like that.
Hopefully
And
more soon.
yeah, hopefully. Well, my goal is to get 100. I'm really hoping to do that this year. But it was also, it came out, it was published in May of 2021, and it was the new business book release on Amazon in April, and Seth Godin endorsed it.
That's amazing.
Excellent.
That's
I look
amazing.
forward to checking it out.
Yeah.
Do you talk in the book also about naming?
Yeah, oh, yeah, I have a whole chapter, and each chapter, like I said, it's connected to a marketing myth. So this one is called
Uh,
Rose by Any Other Name.
sorry again.
A Rose by Any Other Name.
Okay.
I like that.
Uh-huh.
So
Very
each
nice.
Would not
chapter
smell it.
deals with a different thing, and
Mhm.
the one that one of my favorites actually is, and I have a chapter called the Nike Syndrome, and then
Oh, good.
this one also is the gold standard word of mouth, and
Mhm.
so how people think about word of mouth, because usually people say, well, I don't need marketing because I have word of mouth. So-
Right. Awesome. Amazing, amazing. It's on my to-read list already, so I'm definitely planning to read your book.
Thank you.
Um,
Love, yeah, love a review.
yeah, hopefully I will be one of the 100. And
Thank you. I would love that. Thank you so much. I'd really
absolutely. Matt, do you have any other questions?
No, I mean we could go on. This is fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so I look forward to checking the book out. And Orly, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank
Moshe,
you.
thank you as always.
My
Absolutely.
pleasure.
Thank you so much, Orly. That was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you to all the fans. We'll talk to you next time.
Take care, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.